When my son looked me in the eyes and said, "We're not expecting you for Christmas this year," I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply nodded, stood up, and walked to the door. By the time I turned the key in my ignition, I already knew what I had to do. Not out of spite, out of clarity. For 5 years, I'd been holding up the weight of a family that only remembered me when the mortgage was due or the pipes burst. But this was something else. This was exile. From a house I paid for, from a family I raised. It all began 2 weeks before Christmas, in a living room I had furnished down to the last curtain rod. "Smells like cinnamon," I said casually, taking in the warm scent drifting through the air. Isabella always liked her expensive candles, the kind that cost more than my monthly phone bill. I sat deeper into their oversized leather couch, the one I helped them pick out when they said their old one looked too modest for guests. Michael sat across from me, eyes shifting, hands fidgeting with the remote that controlled the fireplace I'd paid to install last winter. The silence between us stretched thin. I smiled anyway. I thought maybe I'd cook this year. Turkey with that sage stuffing your mom loved. Remember how she always said it was better than her grandmother's? He didn't smile. He didn't look up. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, "Dad, we're actually not expecting you this year." It took me a moment to register the words. "Not expecting me?" My smile faltered. "What do you mean?" I asked, still hoping this was some miscommunication, a scheduling conflict, anything else. "You're not coming to Christmas?" Michael finally looked up, but not at me. His eyes hovered somewhere over my shoulder, like a child waiting for backup. "Isabella's parents are flying in," he said. "They'd prefer if it were just them this year." His voice sounded rehearsed, like something agreed upon behind a closed bedroom door. "They'd prefer," I repeated. He winced. "It's nothing personal, Dad. They have traditions, their own way of doing the holidays." My eyes scanned the room. The granite countertops, the high-end mixer on the kitchen island, $2,000 for a baking phase that lasted 3 weekends. The chandelier, the crown molding, the hardwood floors, all of it funded by a man who apparently didn't fit their atmosphere. "So where should I go?" I asked. The question came out quieter than I intended. Maybe I was asking myself. Maybe I wanted to see if he had an answer. Michael fumbled. "Maybe Aunt Rosa's? Or we could do something the weekend after. Like Christmas was just a box on the calendar. Something reschedulable, like a dentist appointment." I stood up slowly, knees creaking from years of physical labor, of bending so others could stand taller. Michael didn't follow. He stayed planted on the couch, surrounded by the things I'd bought, wearing the guilt like an ill-fitting sweater. I paused at the door. "Tell Isabella's parents something for me," I said without turning. "What?" he asked. "Feliz Navidad." Then I opened the door and walked into the December cold, not angry, not broken, but certain. Certain that this would be the last year I spent a dime on people who thought my love came with a balance sheet. The drive home that night felt longer than usual. Not because of traffic, because every streetlight, every turn passed by a piece of my past, a memory I had paid for but was no longer welcome in. I passed the intersection where I taught Michael how to ride a bike. He cried when he fell, but I told him he was brave, and that real strength wasn't about not falling. It was about getting back up. Funny how those lessons fade when the tuition is forgotten. South Hills was glowing with Christmas lights, wreaths on doors, inflatable Santas on lawns, families gathering, children laughing, all while I drove back to a house that no one called home anymore. My home used to be full of warmth, of noise, of Maria's laughter. But ever since she passed, it had been just me, and the sound of other people taking while I kept giving. I used to believe family meant sacrifice, and I don't regret what I gave. But now, with the silence wrapping itself around me like a wool coat soaked in cold rain, I began to wonder, when exactly did sacrifice become expected? When did my generosity stop being a gift and start being a bill they assumed I'd always pay? I remember when Michael and Isabella bought that house, or rather, when I bought it for them. They were young, eager, full of dreams and short on savings. "Just until we're settled," they said. "Just until things get easier." I took out a home equity loan, signed the dotted line, put my own retirement on pause to fund their down payment. $47,000 just disappeared. I told myself it was worth it, that helping them build a future was more important than comfort in my old age. And when Michael lost his job 2 years later, I didn't hesitate. "Don't worry, son," I said. "I've got it covered." I started making the mortgage payments directly, $2,800. Every month, like clockwork. I trimmed my budget, skipped vacations, cut corners at the grocery store, peanut butter sandwiches for lunch, instant coffee, second-hand shoes, so they could have Christmas trees that touched the ceiling, so Isabella could host brunches for friends who never knew my name. They renovated the kitchen that second year. "It's an investment," she said. "Granite countertops, custom cabinets, a wine fridge, $18,000 on my credit card." I had to cancel a dentist appointment that month, couldn't afford the copay. A man with a cracked molar and a bleeding gum, funding a kitchen worthy of a magazine spread. The third year, the landscaping. They said curb appeal mattered, and I agreed. Of course I did. I wanted them to be proud of their home. What father wouldn't want that? I paid for the lawn service, the patio furniture, the stone walkway, the string lights Isabella said would make summer nights magical. I watched my savings melt like snow under warm lights that weren't even strung on my roof. And every holiday, birthdays, anniversaries, graduations, I showed up with gifts and checks. I paid for the emergency vet visit when their dog got sick. I covered their car repair when Isabella hit a curb in the rain. I even paid their property taxes once, so they wouldn't get penalized. They never even said thank you. They just called it handled, like I was the help. Sometimes I'd sit at home, lights off, holding the heating bill in one hand and the grocery list in the other, doing math, realizing there was no way to stretch one check across two houses, mine and theirs, so I always chose theirs. Mine could wait, my repairs could wait, my dreams could wait. And for what? To be told I didn't fit their holiday atmosphere, that my cooking was too spicy, my music too loud, my presence too inconvenient? I'd given up more than money. I'd given up time. 5 years of moments I could have spent fixing my own house, traveling, buying new clothes, seeing friends. Instead, I worked weekends, picked up side jobs, said no to dinners out, said no to myself, over and over again. And all for a family that never once asked how I was doing. Never once said, "Dad, are you okay?" I drove past Lincoln Street, where I'd sat with a loan officer 3 winters ago, refinancing my home so Michael wouldn't lose his. The woman behind the desk had looked at me with a mix of pity and confusion. "You sure you want to do this, Mr. Flores?" she asked. "You're putting a lot on the line." And I remember smiling. "It's for my son," I said. "It'll be worth it." It wasn't. Not because helping him was wrong, but because somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing it as help. He started seeing it as owed. And Isabella, she never saw me as anything but a walking wallet with brown skin and calloused hands. A handyman with a heart too soft for his own good. By the time I pulled into my driveway that night, I wasn't angry. I was empty. The kind of empty you feel after giving blood. Except they hadn't taken a pint. They'd taken everything, and left me out in the cold while they toasted champagne in a house I built, one I wasn't welcome in. The next morning, I was pouring my second cup of coffee when my phone rang. 10:47 a.m. I remember the exact time because the scent of a Colombian roast had just filled the kitchen, a small luxury I hadn't allowed myself in years. I looked down and saw her name, Isabella. For a second I considered ignoring it. But something told me this call wasn't about apologies. It was about control. So I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Let her wonder. "Dennis?" she said with a voice so sugary it could rot your teeth. I heard about the little misunderstanding with Michael. I didn't say a word, just stared out the window as steam curled from my mug. "I know this must be a lot to process," she went on, "but we need to focus on practical matters now. My parents are flying in this weekend, and we need someone to pick them up from the airport." I set my coffee down and leaned against the counter. "Did you forget about our conversation yesterday?" I asked. Her tone hardened just slightly, like someone tugging on a silk glove hiding a claw. "Look, whatever that was about, we need to keep things moving. You're the only one with time during the day, and we really need the help." I felt something cold settle in my chest. So, they didn't want me at their table, but I was still good enough to play taxi driver for her parents. "And you're asking me," I said calmly, "because..." There was no hesitation. Because that's what family does, Dennis. They help each other. That word, family, tasted like rust coming out of her mouth. Then came the real insult. And let's be honest here, she added with a sigh. You're not my rival. You're too weak to be my rival. So just get in your truck and pick them up. It landed like a slap, not the words themselves, but the quiet confidence behind them. Like she thought I was already too broken to push back. What airline? I asked. Alaska Air, Flight 447. They'll be at baggage claim, Carousel 3. She paused. And Dennis? Maybe wear that blue shirt you wore to Michael's graduation. My parents noticed you clean up well. Just don't embarrass us. No please, no thank you, just an instruction. Then the line went dead. 3 minutes and 17 seconds. That's how long the call lasted. But I stood there another 10 minutes, not moving, the steam gone from my mug, the heat drained from my face. They wanted to help, but they didn't want me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the call, but because of what it meant. Her voice kept echoing in my head like a radio I couldn't turn off. They're not used to your kind of cooking. All that spicy Mexican food. They're educated people, Dennis. They expect conversations about current events, literature, art. Educated people. My kind of cooking. She may as well have said it plainly. You're not one of us. I thought back to the Sundays I used to cook for them. Tamales that Isabella claimed reminded her of her grandmother. Pozole she called life-changing. My food, my culture, my presence. All of it had been good enough when they needed a free meal. But now that her parents were coming, now I was just a man with loud music and too much seasoning. She said her parents expected a certain atmosphere, and apparently I wasn't welcome in it. The granite countertops, the expensive wine fridge, the crystal centerpiece on the table I bought, all looked better without me standing near them. I wasn't the atmosphere, I was the shadow cast by it. For years I bit my tongue. Every side comment about my hands being rough, every laugh when I mispronounced some European wine, every smirk when I asked about the thermostat settings because their house always felt cold. But this wasn't subtle. This was a wall being built right in front of me, one I was no longer invited to climb over. I walked into the living room and stood in front of the photo of Maria, our 30th anniversary. She was wearing the gold necklace I'd saved 6 months to buy. Her smile lit up that frame like a sunrise. She used to tell me, dignity doesn't shout, it doesn't throw things. Dignity just leaves. And that night, I realized I wasn't going to shout either. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg to be included. I was simply going to stop showing up. They could keep their atmosphere, their fancy shirts, their pedigree conversations. What they'd never have again was my time, my energy, my money, my silence. Because when you realize someone thinks they're better than you, not because they've done more, but because you've given them more than they deserved, something inside you breaks. Not in a way that leaves you shattered, in a way that leaves you free. And as I turned off the kitchen light that night, something settled in my chest. Something heavy, something final. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't even anger, it was clarity. The kind of clarity that makes a man stop asking to be seen and start planning to be remembered. The next morning, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check the weather. I didn't open the blinds. I just sat at my kitchen table and stared at the same pile of mail I'd been ignoring for months. Statements, receipts, bank letters, all with my name on them, but none that really belonged to me. They were tied to another household, a lifestyle I funded, but no longer had access to. Mortgage bills I paid for a home I wasn't welcome in. It felt less like charity and more like tribute. Like I was some forgotten king still paying taxes to the new rulers of my own kingdom. I pulled the drawer open and took out the manila folder, the one I never wanted to look at too closely. The one that held everything, the truth, the math, the damage. 5 years of automatic payments, direct withdrawals, late-night wire transfers, and all the evidence of my slow erosion. The paper was curled at the edges. Some of the ink had faded. But the numbers were still bold. I laid out the statements across the table, month by month. $2,800 here, $2,800 there. Every 15th like clockwork, like a ritual I never missed. Even when it meant skipping lunch or delaying a doctor's visit. The numbers lined up like tombstones. I added them again. I already knew the total, but I needed to feel it. Year 1, $33,600. Year 2, another $33,600. Year 3, same. By year 4, I'd stopped buying anything new. No clothes, no car repairs. I was patching shoes with glue. This 5th year, I'd started cutting cable, skipping real meals, drinking instant coffee in cracked mugs. $168,000. That's what I had paid, in mortgage alone. Not counting the $47,000 I loaned them for the down payment. Not counting the $18,000 kitchen remodel. Not counting the thousands that bled out of me for property taxes, furniture, landscaping, pet emergencies, birthday parties, broken appliances, and shopping trips disguised as essentials. And what did I get in return? A canceled invitation to dinner, and a request to chauffeur the parents of the woman who didn't think I was fit to sit at her table. I stood up and walked to the fridge. There was half a sandwich from yesterday and a jar of peanut butter. That was my diet now. Sandwiches and skipped meals. Meanwhile, they were posting photos of 5-course dinners and wine nights in the dining room I'd helped them furnish. I poured myself a glass of water and stared at the phone on the counter. Quiet. Still. Waiting. My bank's number was saved in my favorites. I'd called it 100 times before, but always to make things easier for them. This time, I was calling to make things easier for me. I sat down, took a breath, and hit dial. The line rang twice before a woman picked up. "Customer service, this is Jennifer. How can I help you today?" I cleared my throat. "I need to cancel an automatic transfer." "Of course," she said, professional and kind. "Can I get your account number and verify some information?" I gave her everything she needed. Then I waited. I could hear her typing in the background. Her voice came back calm, neutral, like she didn't know the emotional weight of what I was about to say. "I see the transfer here. $2,800 monthly to Wells Fargo. Account ending in 7423. Looks like it's been active for 5 years." 5 years. The words tasted like copper. "Yes," I said. "I want it canceled. Effective immediately." There was a pause. "Confirmed," she said. "The transfer has been deactivated. You'll receive a confirmation in the mail within 3 to 5 business days. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" I looked around my kitchen, at the faded paint, the flickering light bulb, the leaking window I never fixed because I was always short on money. "No," I said, "that's everything." And for the first time in a long time, it really was. I ended the call and stared at the quiet phone, now still again. It felt like the silence after a storm, a kind of sacred stillness. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence that comes when something heavy has finally been set down. I sat there for a while longer, letting it sink in. There would be no more payments, no more automatic withdrawals, no more watching my own life shrink so someone else's could expand, no more sitting in the dark so they could shine. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the windows. Cold December air rushed in, sharp and clean. It cut through the musty heat of regret that had filled my home for too long. I walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and one by one, fed the old statements into the flames. The paper curled and blackened, years of quiet sacrifice turning to ash in front of me. Not out of spite, not out of rage, but out of relief. The kind that comes when a man finally wakes up from a dream he didn't realize was a nightmare. As the fire crackled, I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the good kind, from the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. Turns out the moment you stop letting people treat you like a doormat is a special occasion. I raised the glass to the mantel where Maria's photo still sat, calm, radiant, timeless. "I did it," I whispered. "Finally." She didn't answer, of course, but the air felt lighter, as if maybe, just maybe, she approved. The morning of their arrival, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had somewhere to be, because I didn't. And for once that wasn't a problem. It was a decision. I made myself breakfast, real breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, a full pot of Earl Grey. I used the good plate, sat in silence, took my time. The snow was falling outside, gentle and slow, the kind of December snowfall that doesn't just blanket the world, it muffles it, makes everything quieter, cleaner. I checked the time. 10:52 a.m., flight 447 from Portland. Arrival time, 2 p.m., Carousel 3. Isabella had listed every detail like I was her assistant, her driver, her help. She never asked if I was available, never said thank you. She gave orders. because that's what she thought I was there for, to serve and disappear. I took another sip of tea and looked at the unfinished crossword from yesterday. 7 across. Delayed gratification, 12 letters. The answer came instantly. Postponement. The irony made me smile. All these years I'd postponed everything, joy, rest, dignity, so they could live easier. That ended today. I didn't pack a coat, didn't check traffic, didn't fill up the truck, because I wasn't going anywhere. At 1:30, while they were wheeling their polished luggage toward baggage claim, I was sinking into my recliner, blanket over my lap, the warmth of afternoon sunlight pressing gently through the window. At 2, the moment I was supposed to pull up curbside, pop the trunk, and smile like I hadn't been erased from Christmas, I flipped to the sports section. At 2:17, Isabella's name lit up my screen. I let it ring. At 2:47, a text. "Dad, where are you? My parents are waiting." I turned the phone face down on the table. At 3:15, the buzzing became constant. 6 missed calls. I poured another cup of tea and started organizing the kitchen junk drawer I hadn't touched in months. It's incredible what you can accomplish when you're not rushing to serve people who only acknowledge your existence when they need something. At 3:45, a new number rang. I didn't recognize it, but I knew who it was. Probably one of them borrowing a stranger's phone at the terminal. I didn't answer. I imagined them outside, coats zipped up to their chins, scanning the curb every time a truck passed, still convinced I must be stuck in traffic. Still convinced I wouldn't dare not show up. At 4:15, the buzzing turned aggressive. Isabella, the unknown number, then Isabella again. The sound was like a wasp trapped in a jar. Angry, pointless, loud. I walked into the kitchen, unplugged the landline from the wall, then powered down my cell completely. Silence. Real silence. Not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from being free. I made a grilled cheese sandwich and heated up tomato soup. Ate slowly, no distractions, no tension. Just the warmth of good food and the awareness that, across town, 3 people were wondering how I had the audacity to treat them the way they treated me. By 5, I had finished dinner, loaded the dishwasher, and picked out a movie. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a full evening to myself, without errands, without demands, without last-minute favors that sounded like requests but were really instructions. At 5:37, someone pounded on my front door. Not knocked, pounded. The kind of pounding that rattles the frame and dares you not to respond. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. All 3 of them. Isabella in the back, mascara smudged, coat wrinkled. Catherine beside her, stiff and fuming. And Cody, front and center, face red, fists clenched, ready to unload. I didn't open the door right away. Let them wait in the cold. Let them wonder if I'd answer at all. When I finally opened it, I stood tall in the frame. No words, no warmth. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Cody snapped, storming past me into my living room without so much as a pause. "We waited at that damn airport for over 3 hours. Catherine followed, her voice trembling with indignation. "This is completely unacceptable behavior for someone your age, Dennis. Barbaric." Isabella trailed behind them, lips pressed tight, eyes flaring with embarrassment. "You humiliated us. My parents had to take a taxi, a $40 taxi, Dad." I didn't move, didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "Get out of my house." The room froze. Cody turned, jaw tight. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said. "This is my house, and I want you out of it, now." He took a step forward, finger raised. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I've been in this city longer than you've been breathing its air. I have connections, people who can make your life very difficult." "Is that a threat, Mr. Jenkins?" I asked calmly. He leaned in, voice low. "It's a promise." Catherine stepped in next. "Dennis, don't be stupid. My husband has social and professional reach. You don't treat people like this and expect it to go unnoticed." Isabella tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, let's go. He's not worth it." They turned to leave, but Cody paused at the door. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "I guarantee it." I closed the door behind them slowly, turned the lock, clicked off the porch light. Through the blinds, I watched them pile into their car, still arguing, still unraveling. But inside, the house was warm, still, peaceful. No yelling, no guilt, no weight on my chest. Just the soft hum of a heater and the quiet dignity of a man who had finally stopped apologizing for reclaiming his own life. 3 days later, I was enjoying my morning coffee when I saw my own face staring back at me from page 3 of the Spokane Review, a blurry, outdated headshot from my company website. The headline read, "Spokane Man Abandons Elderly Couple at Airport During Holiday Storm." I blinked, set my cup down, read it again, and then I laughed. Not the kind of laugh you let out when something's funny. The kind of laugh that escapes when you realize your enemies just fired the first public shot and missed the heart. The article described how Cody and Catherine Jenkins had been stranded in dangerous winter conditions, waiting for a relative who never arrived. There were quotes from Cody about how I'd ignored multiple calls, how they were forced to take a costly taxi in unsafe weather, how my erratic behavior had become a growing concern among those close to the family. It even suggested I might be suffering from some sort of mental decline. No mention of the 5 years of financial support. No mention of being uninvited from Christmas. No mention of being treated like an invisible servant until the moment I pushed back. It was a clean, surgical hit piece. No direct lies, just omission, framing, and carefully placed pity. The kind of thing Cody knew how to pull off, because it's exactly what men like him do when their power is threatened. They don't argue, they smear. I flipped to the byline, Patricia Morrison, lifestyle editor, never heard of her, but I knew what happened. Cody used his business network to feed her the story. A favor here, a suggestion there, maybe a quiet lunch with someone who owed him. It didn't take much. In a town like Spokane, reputations move fast and fall hard. But what Cody didn't understand was this. He just escalated the game from private to public. And that meant I could respond in kind. I finished my coffee, folded the paper neatly, and walked to my desk. My laptop was already open. I didn't hesitate. I typed in one name after another. Cody Jenkins, Catherine Jenkins, Isabella Flores. Then I pulled up their social media. Their connections, their circles, their carefully curated lives. Cody's Facebook was boring. All golf tournaments and photos with city council members. But LinkedIn? That was a goldmine. Retired First National Bank manager, treasurer of the Inland Northwest Business Leaders Association, member of the Spokane Country Club, a man with a reputation for integrity, a man with a lot to lose. Catherine's Instagram painted a different story. Charity luncheons, designer handbags, beach vacations, every post dripping with status, friends commenting things like "have blessed" and "love your energy," all image, all glass, all waiting to be shattered. Then there was Isabella. Her Facebook timeline was a living contradiction. Posts about budgeting and frugality, next to check-ins at 5-star restaurants and photos of furniture I'd paid for. Just a week earlier, she'd posted, "So excited to host Christmas dinner in our beautiful home. Grateful for family." Family, that word again, used like a napkin to clean up the mess they left behind. But it was Michael's LinkedIn that gave me the final piece. His recent activity showed a new connection. Patricia Morrison, the very woman who'd written the hit piece. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. It wasn't just a coincidence, it was a coordinated strike. Cody had called in a favor, Isabella had passed the narrative, and Patricia had packaged it for public consumption. They'd made 3 critical mistakes. First, they underestimated how much I'd documented. Second, they went public, which meant I could go public too. And third, they left fingerprints all over everything. I clicked over to my digital folders and began assembling the evidence. 5 years of mortgage payments, $2,800 a month, canceled checks, bank statements, receipts from home renovations, screenshots of text messages, photos from social media where Isabella showed off the very furniture I paid for, and a copy of the Spokane Review article, now marked with red ink across every lie, every omission, every insult. By evening, I had it all sorted, labeled, and printed. A manila folder so thick it could stop a bullet. I looked at my wall calendar. December 24th was circled in red. Christmas Eve. According to Isabella's Facebook event page, they were hosting a holiday dinner. 12 guests, family, friends, neighbors, people who read the newspaper and had no idea who was really footing the bill behind that perfect suburban image. Perfect. Because I wasn't just going to reclaim my dignity, I was going to return it with interest. In front of an audience. I didn't feel angry, I didn't feel reckless. I felt like a builder. Like a man stacking bricks of truth to construct something stronger than revenge, something undeniable. Because the thing about people like Cody and Isabella is, they rely on image. They think as long as they control the narrative, they control the power. But they forget that image is fragile. And facts are blunt instruments. As I slid the last page into the folder and sealed it shut, I thought about how many years I'd let things go. How many insults I'd let slide. How many times I told myself it wasn't worth it. But standing there in the soft light of my home, looking at the mountain of proof in front of me, I realized something. It was always worth it. I wasn't trying to destroy them. I was simply going to show the truth, and let their own lies do the rest. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve, and I had somewhere to be. Christmas Eve arrived gray and quiet. The kind of winter day where the light feels filtered, like the world is watching through frosted glass. I shaved, pressed my best suit, the navy one I'd worn to Maria's funeral, a suit meant for endings, for letting go. But today wasn't about grief. Today was about resurrection. By 5:30 I had stacked 12 folders in my briefcase, one for each guest. Inside, 5 years of bank statements, renovation receipts, photos, screenshots, mortgage documents, and a copy of the article from the Spokane Review, annotated in red ink. A curated portfolio of the truth. Every page a silent witness to the story they thought I'd never tell. At 6:30, I parked across the street from their house, lights glowing in every window, laughter floating out with the smell of roasted ham and cinnamon-sweet candles. Cars lined the curb. Through the window, I saw Isabella smiling, holding a wine glass, playing the hostess. I wondered if she had any idea how close she was to the last moment of her carefully constructed life. I walked up the steps and found the door unlocked. Of course it was. Isabella liked to brag about how safe their neighborhood was. "We don't need to lock doors around here," she'd said once. I stepped inside quietly, the warmth of the house wrapping around me like a costume I no longer wore. I walked past the foyer, past the designer coat rack, past the mirror where I saw a man who no longer bent his head in shame. They were all seated at the dining room table when I entered. 12 faces turned toward me, caught between confusion and alarm. Cody's hand froze around his wine glass. Catherine's smile twitched and vanished. Isabella's voice cracked mid-sentence. And Michael, my son, went pale. "Good evening," I said calmly, setting my briefcase on the sideboard. "I hope you don't mind me joining your Christmas celebration." Isabella was the first to recover. "Dennis," she said, her tone sharp with panic, "this is completely inappropriate. You need to leave." "Actually," I replied, opening the briefcase, "I think your guests deserve to know who paid for this dinner. This house, this image you've been living in." I began walking around the table, placing a folder in front of each person. 5 years of financial support, $168,000 in mortgage payments alone. Plus the down payment, renovations, furniture, appliances, everything around you. All funded by the man you decided wasn't welcome at your table. The rustling of paper broke the silence as each guest began flipping through the evidence. Faces shifted, eyes widened, forks paused midair. "What is this?" asked a woman I didn't recognize. "Pearls, tailored jacket, expensive perfume. Isabella, is this real?" Isabella's face had drained of color. He volunteered to help. We never asked him for all this." I pulled out the newspaper article and set it down. "And yet when I stopped helping, this is what you printed about me. Read closely. Quotes from Cody, planted by connections at the Spokane Review. No mention of my support, just a man painted as dangerous, erratic, disposable." Cody's voice cracked. "Now wait just a minute." "No," I said, louder now. "Let's not wait. Let's be very clear. You told the city I abandoned you in a snowstorm. It was 52 degrees and sunny. You made yourselves victims in a story where you were the abusers. You fed lies to the press, used your social network to spread them, and let me become the villain in a story I bankrolled." The man across from Cody, a businessman, judging by the watch, flipped through the receipts with disbelief. "This is outrageous. Cody, you let this man pay your daughter's bills and then let him get shredded in the paper?" Catherine jumped in. "This is being completely blown out of proportion. He's twisting things, making it theatrical." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the screenshots of Isabella's social media posts. "Is it theatrical to post about your beautiful home and hosting family for the holidays when the man who funded it was told to spend Christmas alone? Is it dramatic to point out that you mocked my food, my background, and my presence while spending my money? I turned toward Isabella, who was visibly shaking now. You said I didn't belong in the atmosphere your parents expected, that my cooking was too Mexican, that my conversation wasn't elegant enough. You called me weak. You told me I wasn't your rival. I paused. Let the weight hang there. You're right, I'm not your rival, because rivals stand on equal ground, and I've already climbed higher than you ever will. Michael finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. Dad, I didn't know they were going to write that article. I swear I didn't. But you stood by, I said quietly. You knew what they thought of me. You knew how they treated me, and you let it happen because comfort was easier than confrontation. The room had shifted. 12 people who had arrived to celebrate the perfect holiday now sat in stunned silence, surrounded by documents that didn't lie. A woman near the end of the table closed her folder and looked at Isabella. You let your father-in-law cover your entire life for 5 years and then cut him out like a servant? Cody stood, desperate now. This man is mentally unstable. Look at him. He showed up here with files. He's trying to embarrass us. No, I said, my voice low but clear. I'm trying to tell the truth. Something none of you thought I was capable of. I turned toward the guests. You were told one version of the story. The version where I was bitter, erratic, abandoning a helpless couple. What you weren't told is that I've been quietly supporting a family that stopped treating me like one of their own the minute I wasn't convenient. Catherine's voice rose as again, trying to regain control. You're humiliating yourself, Dennis. We're not going to sit here and be attacked in our own home. Your home? I asked. You mean the home I mortgaged mine to help you buy? The home I put floors in, counters in, paid taxes on? This isn't your home. It's mine. You're just squatting in it. Isabella stood, hands shaking, voice cracking. Get out. I looked at her calmly. Don't worry, I'm leaving, but not before everyone here knows the truth. You wanted to make me small, silent. You wanted to erase me with politeness and PR. But the difference between silence and surrender is that one is a choice. I picked up my briefcase, walked toward the door, then paused one last time. Enjoy the dinner. It's the last one I'll ever pay for. And with that, I stepped out into the cold night. Behind me, the eruption began. Voices rising, accusations flying. The sound of a carefully curated social empire collapsing in slow motion. It was the most beautiful Christmas music I'd ever heard. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in March. Certified mail, heavy envelope, government seal, you know the kind. The kind that never brings good news. I signed for it at the door, the mail carrier barely making eye contact. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside, but I did anyway. Slowly, intentionally, like peeling the final layer off a wound that had already started to scar. Notice of default. Final demand for payment. 3 months behind, $8,400 in arrears. 14 days to bring the account current or face foreclosure proceedings on the house I helped them buy. I set the letter down on the counter beside my coffee, looked out the window, and let the spring air move through the kitchen like a silent witness. It smelled like wet soil, like melting snow, like new beginnings. It didn't smell like regret. My phone had been ringing for weeks by then. Desperate calls, hysterical voicemails, blocked numbers, Isabella's voice full of panic, as if urgency could erase history. I never picked up. I didn't need to. I already knew what they wanted. Even Cody had called, his voice shaking, no longer smug. The city's social circles had cooled around them since Christmas. People talk, especially when receipts are involved. Michael called too. The first few messages were defensive, then apologetic, then just tired. I ignored them all. Not out of cruelty, out of principle, out of peace. Until one Thursday evening, someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find my son standing there. Shoulders slouched, suit wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow. Not because he was weak, but because he was carrying the weight I used to hold for him. Dad, he said quietly, we need to talk. I stepped aside and let him in. He looked around the house like he hadn't really seen it before. New paint on the walls, new couch, new light fixture over the dining table. Small upgrades I'd finally made once I stopped subsidizing someone else's life. It looks nice, he said. It's what happens when you stop funding people who don't appreciate it, I replied, settling into my chair. Coffee? He shook his head and sat on the edge of the couch like he wasn't sure he was allowed to get comfortable. I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it. Christmas, the article, what Isabella said, what we let her parents say. I should have defended you. He looked at his hands. I should have stood up for you years ago. Yes, I said simply. You should have. We sat in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that doesn't ask for forgiveness, only recognition. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's lawnmower in the distance, birds chirping in new trees, the sounds of a life moving forward. The house is in foreclosure, he said eventually. I know. We can't make the payments without. He stopped, realizing how it sounded. Without me, I finished. He nodded, ashamed. I don't know what we're going to do. We might lose everything. You'll figure it out, I said. The same way I figured out how to live without a son who respected me. The same way I learned to spend Christmas alone while you celebrated with people who thought I was beneath them. Tears welled up in his eyes. He didn't try to hide them. I lost you, didn't I? I looked at him for a long time. You didn't lose me. You gave me away. There's a difference. Is there any chance, he asked, voice cracking, that you could forgive me? I forgave you months ago, I said, and I meant it. But forgiveness doesn't mean we go back to how things were. It doesn't mean I pretend it never happened. It means if you want to rebuild something with me, you'll have to earn it. Slowly, without expecting me to carry the weight. He nodded again, quieter now, straighter somehow. What about the house, he asked. Isn't my problem anymore, I replied. You're a grown man. You'll have to make grown man decisions. He stood slowly, paused at the door. Seeing you stand up for yourself that night, he said, I was proud of you. Angry, ashamed, but proud. Good, I said. Maybe there's still hope for you yet. After he left, I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey and stepped out onto the back porch. The trees were budding. The wind was warm. Spring had arrived in Spokane, and for the first time in years, it felt like it belonged to me. It's strange how quickly silence can become sacred. For years, I used to wake up to the sound of debt, not literal alarms or phone calls, but the quiet dread of owing. Time, money, explanations. I'd wake with the weight of what was expected. Now I wake up and just breathe. No obligations, no sacrifices disguised as love. Just breath and a body that finally belongs to me. I started walking in the mornings. Not power walks, not exercise routines. Just slow, deliberate walks around the neighborhood. There's an old park near my house, the kind with benches carved from stone and trees that have outlived presidents. I sit there some mornings and just watch people. Mothers chasing toddlers, older couples walking hand in hand, teenagers staring at their phones like they're decoding the universe. I watch them, and I don't feel bitter. I don't feel sad. I feel present. Like I've finally stepped back into my own life. It took months for the noise to fade. The texts, the voicemails, the thinly veiled pleas from Cody and Isabella's parents, all of it eventually stopped. After the house went into full foreclosure, they moved. Not far, just smaller. A townhouse on the edge of the city. From what I hear, Isabella doesn't host anymore, and the guest list that used to fill 12 seats now fits at a folding table. Michael still calls, once a week. Sometimes we talk about nothing, weather, books, old movies. Sometimes he talks about therapy. I don't pry, but I listen, because listening is something I was never offered when I needed it most. He doesn't ask for money. He doesn't bring up Isabella. He's just showing up. I think he understands now that presence is the real currency in a family. As for me, I've started fixing things around the house, repainting the porch, installing new light fixtures. I even built a bookshelf for the living room, something Maria always wanted, but I never made time for. Her picture still sits on the mantle, and when the sun hits it just right, it lights up her face like the memory of a blessing. I talk to her sometimes. Not out loud, not like in the movies, just quiet thoughts, moments of gratitude. She was the last person who loved me without conditions. That kind of memory doesn't fade. It becomes part of your backbone. I found the old journal she gave me once. Back when Michael was a teenager. Write it down, she'd said. When the world tries to erase you, write yourself back in. I never understood what she meant until I started using it. Every day now I write one page. Not long. Just what I see, what I feel, what I've let go of. It's become my form of prayer. Last week, I took a road trip, first one in years. Just me, an overnight bag, and a second-hand map. I didn't have a destination, just a direction, west. Somewhere past Yakima, I stopped at a diner with a jukebox and a waitress who called everyone Han. She poured me black coffee and asked if I was passing through. I told her, no, just arriving. She smiled like she understood something deeper than the question, like maybe she had stories of her own. I stayed in a cheap motel with thin walls and thick blankets. I watched bad TV and slept without a single worry pressing down on my chest. In the morning, I took the long route back, through mountains that still had snow on top and valleys where nothing felt urgent. I stopped at a lookout point and stood there for almost an hour. No phone, no photos, just air and space and the feeling of being untethered. It's hard to describe what peace feels like when you've lived without it for so long. It's not joy, it's not relief, it's quiet. Deep, anchoring quiet. The kind that wraps around your bones and reminds you that you are enough. That your value was never measured by how much you give or how long you endure, but by how wholly you choose to live once you finally decide to. I've had people ask me if I regret what I did. If it was too harsh, too public, if maybe I should have handled it privately with grace. And to them I say this: silence is not always grace. Sometimes silence is erasure. And when someone tries to erase you, the loudest thing you can do is exist, unapologetically, truthfully, and without shame. I didn't cancel the mortgage out of vengeance. I did it because I had finally remembered that I too am someone worth keeping warm. I didn't expose them to be cruel. I did it because lies rot from the inside, and sunlight is the only cure. I've made peace with the fact that not everyone will understand. Some will call me petty, others will call me brave. The truth lies somewhere in between. I was a man who gave everything, and when I had nothing left, I chose to give myself a second chance. And maybe that's the real gift in all this. Not revenge, not justice, but reclamation. Taking back the years they tried to spend on my behalf. Taking back my name, my voice, my life. This Christmas, I'll be spending it differently. No crowded tables. No tense small talk. Just a few friends from the community center, the ones who showed up when no one else did. We're planning a potluck, some board games, maybe a movie marathon. And you know what? I've never looked forward to anything more. I bought a new bottle of whiskey for the occasion. Not to numb anything, but to celebrate. To raise a glass not to the past, but to the man I chose to become when I finally stopped waiting for someone else to see me. So here's to endings that feel like beginnings. Here's to the power of walking away. And here's to all the people out there who are still swallowing their own voice just to keep the peace. May they one day learn what I did, that your peace is worth more than their comfort. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can ever say is no more. Before you go, let me ask you something. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have stayed silent, kept giving, kept hoping they'd finally see your worth? Or would you have done what I did? Stood up, stepped away, and reclaimed your peace? I want to hear your thoughts. Really. Drop a comment below and tell me, because your story matters too. And if this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of a moment you've lived through, or a choice you wish you'd made, go ahead and like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. This is Revenge is Mine, where every story proves that silence isn't weakness, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.